So facilitation, it's one of those topics that does get neglected from a leadership or consulting point of view. The kind of, you're kind of just expected to be good at running and facilitating a workshop, right? Especially as if you're doing a consultant role, often you end up running group work, larger scale meetings, running full-on workshops as part of the job, right? But nobody ever then trains you how to do that, which is a shame because, I've also, I've worked with hundreds of consultants and been involved in very large transformations. And you get people that turn up, run a workshop. Oh, here comes Jamie. That run a workshop, and the workshop is just terrible, super boring, very unorganized, very chaotic, all of that kind of thing. So facilitation is actually a really good skill to have for anything, whether you're just involved in projects, whether you're running larger scale meetings, whether you're running full-on workshops, or even large conference style events. The skills of facilitation are super useful in life. Hi Jamie, how you doing?
Hey Mark, how are you?
Very good, very good. We're just jumping in today. The topic is facilitation. And this connects a little bit to last week's session, where we started talking about change management. How do you overcome resistance? And the reason why it's really linked to that is people think of change management, people change management, as mainly communication. But actually, the communication element of good change management is maybe only 10%. Change management is about accelerating people through the change curve, all through the learning curve. And one of the most effective tools of accelerating people either through the change and or through the learning curve is to run something like a big workshop. Get people together, stick them in a room or even a virtual room nowadays, and get them working together. That is a genuine accelerator for change. So being a good facilitator of things like workshops is a really good skill to have. So what experience have you got running workshops? Go for it. Let's share. Jamie, I know you've done kind of workshops in the past. What's your experience?
Yeah, I don't know. I think just having to be engaging for the others, because as soon as you lose concentration, everyone else loses concentration. So I think key is to just stay focused and like maybe have a Red Bull before going in, so you've got a lot of energy.
Absolutely. I mean, you pick on two side effects of good facilitation. The concentration you need, actually, is a really good point that you pick up on. You have to be 100% focused. If you're doing other stuff, focused on other stuff, you can't keep up with what's going on in the workshop. And then the workshop will just naturally fall apart because you're not on top of it. Also, taking on board the content that's being discussed. And as a result of that, usually after a workshop, you can feel very tired, exhausted. Hence, the need for coffee and Red Bull is almost a necessity when it comes to facilitating workshops. Absolutely. It's a good point that you raised, though. You do need to focus. Absolutely. Isabella, your experiences around any kind of facilitating, big meetings, workshops, etc.
So I wouldn't say big meetings, but I mean, I'm not really long workshops, but I do run some weekly meetings. And I don't know, from my experience, you just need to have a list of topics and actually go and ask for decisions, because what I find very frustrating in some meetings is that we just talk, right? And decisions are not really made, or actions are not really written down. So that's usually where I focus my attention on having the information to allow somebody to make a decision. And once the decision is made, then writing down minutes and we say, okay, that's what we decided in this call, so we can move forward. That's what I'm using.
And That's perfect. You're doing exactly the right thing, which is focusing on the decisions and getting decisions made, and then once the decision is made, really, document it as evidence. Maybe we'll touch on the decision-making process a little bit, because as a facilitator then, either of a meeting like that and or of workshops, ultimately nothing will change following a workshop or a big meeting unless people have really decided to take an action of some sort, right? So decisions are a really important part of workshops. Often for inexperienced facilitators, or I've also seen a lot of workshops, is you do a workshop, great activities you might do, in that people come up with fantastic ideas, or whatever the topic is they're working on, and then there's no actions, or there's no decisions. So everybody's had a great workshop, but then nothing happens afterwards, and so the workshop then has kind of lost its purpose, or has been really for nothing.
I absolutely agree. And I mean, something that I heard from another colleague in the project is that who runs the workshop is who has the pen, right? So it should be our responsibility to take down minutes and clarify actions. If we don't know something, we have to ask, but leave out of that meeting with the decision taken, because we have the pen. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. Whoever runs the meeting holds the pen. That's very true. It's very true. And you can, in larger workshops, you can delegate the pen holding to somebody. If you're managing the crowd and focusing on that, you can have somebody, writing the actions, capturing the parking lot, those kind of things. But you should always be in control, though, and come back to whatever's written down. So it's a very good. I like that very much. It's good.
Yeah. Yes, but it's always your ultimate decision to publish that, to review that. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I always try in workshops, building on that, I always try when I've run larger scale workshops, to get the actions, next steps, information from the workshop out to the participants at least within 24 hours. I'll even try and do it within a couple of hours of the workshop finishing, because that way then you'll also push then the actions and the decisions even immediately after the workshop. I've also seen a lot of workshops where you don't hear anything for 2 weeks, and then some information comes out. Being quick on delivering the output is a real benefit. It kind of drives home the action afterwards. Yeah,
but on this, what I find frustrating is that not always people don't always confirm the notes, or they don't really argue back, maybe because they don't want to read emails. But I mean, at least it's documented from one side, right? At least you say that it was discussed. Yeah. That's frustration sometimes, that people don't really read and validate that. But that's what I count as evidence for what we discussed. Yeah.
And that's the important bit, is the evidence word, right? It's the evidence word, because at a certain moment you need to hold the participants accountable for making their decision, and guarantee people don't read meeting minutes. Maybe 1 or 2 people do, but people really don't take the time to read the meeting minutes. But the important piece is the evidence, because then you can hold people accountable for the decisions that they've made, and there's no way that they can say, "Oh, we didn't agree that in the meeting." No, we did. Look, it's on a piece of paper. It's important. Yeah, good. Sarah, any of your experiences?
Well, I was thinking something similar to what Isabella was saying, and it's funny because now we only talk about online workshops, and I had some, of course, examples of real life workshops that we did, and it was very clear that somebody was taking notes and things were happening, and it's not really transferred as much into online workshops. So also I'm missing that part where we come to an answer or conclusion, and it's like right away written down somewhere, and you can see like the progress of the workshop on your screen, and it's interactive. So usually when somebody is sharing a screen, they are sharing a presentation of some sort or something, and you can't really see like the progress, the notes, the things that's happening. So yeah, and in real-time ones, you can't even leave a room. Like if you are holding a workshop, like as soon as you leave a room, like your presence or anything. I had some workshops with students, and they start discussing and doing things and everything, but as soon as you're gone for 5 minutes, the concentration, the focus is gone, and the progress is gone. So yeah.
Yeah, it's and this is so yes, completely agree. Virtual workshops are more difficult for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. It's also more difficult to keep people's attention virtually, because for sure people will be looking at their emails or doing other work whilst you're online. That's why for workshops, not necessarily so much for meetings, but certainly for workshops, really trying to get people to be on the video is a trick to keep them focused and not doing their emails and other stuff at the same time. When it comes to documentation, you know, the outcomes, the actions, all that kind of stuff, that's where a virtual whiteboard really comes in useful, because you know you're physically documenting as you go along, you know, using a whiteboard, and all of the whiteboard that are out there have the functionality then that you can download the output afterwards. So then you can put that, you know, output straight into an email or straight into a PowerPoint presentation and send it out to the participants afterwards. That's why I also, you know, use the whiteboard a lot in meetings and in workshops, because you're capturing the documentation as you go along. People can see the progress as well. Absolutely. Good, makes a lot of sense. So picking up on kind of what you were saying and where some of the challenge is, maybe I'll focus quickly on two things that'll help. One, how to really break down that decision-making process, and two, a little bit then around how you manage the crowd, the documentation as you go. Would that be good for you today?
Sounds great. Thanks, Mark.
That works.
Here we go then. Let's let me just share. Ching, ching. There we go. And we have new functionality in Teams now, so that I can share the presentation and still be in front of the screen at the same time. New functionality. So this is how it tends to work, you know, coming back to hold on, here, right? What tends to happen in meetings is this: somebody makes a proposal of an idea or an action, and what tends to happen is then somebody will immediately say something like, that'll never work, we're not going to be able to implement that, we don't have the resources, we don't have the time. You know, somebody will it's almost certain that somebody will dispute whatever proposal for action is. And of course, the bigger the crowd, the higher the likelihood that somebody is going to dispute whatever proposal, action, design, whatever it might be that you're working on, you know, in the workshop or meeting. And then what happens is, because somebody's disputed it, then either the first person or somebody else that feels like they're trying to mediate will come with a counter proposal. Okay, well, if that won't work, let's do X. And then what happens is, like, you know, somebody then just disputes that idea. So you go round and round in circles, like a game of ping pong, table tennis. You know, the actions just go from one side to the other side and just go round the room, and nobody ever agrees on a final outcome. Or What's actually worse, it can be okay not to agree. You know, if really there's a lot of dispute, nobody agrees, at the end of the meeting you can say, okay, we have not agreed on any action. Is everybody okay with that? Right? Which will often then go around another circle of dispute. What's worse than is a kind of pseudo agreement, where maybe one person in the room goes, yes, we'll do that, but actually everybody else in the room doesn't genuinely agree with that action or decision. And why is that worse? That's worse because everybody leaves the room thinking there's been a decision, when in reality, nobody's committed to the decision. They just go off and do whatever they like to anyway. And I see this happen a lot, certainly the more executive level, in steering committees and things like this, where, you know, people agree, yes, we're going to implement this element of transformation. Then they go to implement it, but actually half the executives either just carry on doing what they want to do or do the exact opposite. I've seen it even with decisions on what IT systems are implemented. They decide, yes, let's go for SAP. And then certain executives know they've gone and implemented Oracle. Right? Completely opposite strategies, because the decision has not genuinely been agreed. Sound familiar? Examples of this? I'm sure you have. So how do you stop that from happening? I think, to Isabella's point, one thing you can do up front is really make it clear at the beginning of the meeting. Okay, at the end of this meeting, we really need a decision. Or at the end of this meeting, we really need actions and action owners. Always add the owner bit, you know, when you talk about actions. So that's a good way of just setting expectations at the beginning of any meeting or workshop. Really be clear at, okay, at the end of this meeting, we need a decision.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, didn't want to interrupt. No, but this happened in a, for example, it's a weekly meeting that we have with the client and like all the teams together. We were having the meetings and no decisions were being made. So we came with a proposal and we actually prepared the slide and we had a conversation outlining that the first minutes of the meeting should be dedicated to decision making of hot topics. Then we can give a status update of the rest of the things. And finally, we managed to achieve that after a few failed tentatives. But I think that's an approach as well, like being clear that that's what you're looking for, and some decisions need to be made. Write it down, and then you can move on. Yeah.
And that's what you're doing is really effective. Absolutely, and you can take more out of that. So you can make that. So the proposal arrow on here, the proposal can come from two places. The proposal can come from the audience, or you as the facilitator can make the proposal. And in that case, what you're doing is you're kind of pre-preparing the proposal and then putting it forward as a recommendation, right? Which is one way of managing the crowd. But you can also then, you know, in bigger workshops where they're coming with actions themselves, they're making the proposal. The secret is, rather than letting counter proposal happen, what you do is you go immediately into an inquire. And there, if you're making the proposal, you know, maybe you've done some pros and cons, or you put, you know, 3 options, but number 1 is your recommended option. You know, you do that kind of preparation. Immediately after you do that, here's the recommendation. You allow people to inquire, and you can even use that word, right? Now we'll take your inquiries or questions about the proposal, but word it like that, because you don't want them to just come with a counter proposal. You want people to inquire and question for clarification, not here's just my counter proposal. Same when it works in reverse. If somebody's, you know, made a proposal of an action in a workshop, before somebody can jump in with a counter proposal, cut them off by saying something as simple as, thank you very much for proposing your action. What do you mean by that? Can you explain a little bit more? Let's dive into why you've come with that action. So before somebody immediately jumps in and says, oh, we can't do that, we don't have the resource, we don't have the time, whatever it is, kind of intervene and ask a few questions. It gives somebody more time to then explain the rationale behind their action and the thinking behind the action. That cuts off the counter proposal. Then what you can ask the audience is say, okay, audience, how do you feel about that? If you were evaluating it, you know, what is going to work well, what might be difficult to implement? And then that way people are already into an evaluation mode rather than just a counter proposal, because counter proposals are not constructive at all. Even if the evaluation comes at the end and say, okay, no, we can't implement that action, that's fine, because at least people have thought through it rather than just throwing a counter proposal. Then through evaluation, then you can reconcile and go, okay, maybe we can't do this, but we can do X. Then you get real agreement at the end of it. It's a subtle difference, but this is the art of facilitation. Knowing when you hear a proposal to jump in quickly and go, hold on, thanks for your input. Let's question that. Let's dive into it a bit deeper. What do you mean by the context? How did you come to that conclusion? Those kind of questions will then throw it into a different cycle of thinking. Make sense? Thoughts? Reactions?
No, I think it makes sense. But I also think asking questions like this come with time and you need more confidence. I mean, I remember when I joined the project, I was always very afraid of asking questions. But then, yeah, because, you know, sometimes you assume that, at least in a big round, you assume that we're supposed to know what we're talking about. But actually, just asking simple questions can give you a lot of information because I don't know, yeah. I already found myself talking to people that I thought they knew a lot just because I didn't really understand what they were talking about. And then now that I am a little bit closer to that, I understand it. If I would have asked simple questions, then I would have understood that the approach would have been different. So asking questions is definitely a way to solve this problem.
And it's great that you've learned that. You know, there's a wonderful caveat in any meeting or in any big workshop. Everybody is okay with this statement, even at the senior executive level in any meeting. If you open with, can I ask a stupid question? People will be perfectly okay with whatever question comes next. It's amazing. I see it in business so much. If you really say, can I ask a stupid question? It doesn't matter what the question is that comes next. People are far more open to listen and respond to your question if you just say those few words. Can I ask the stupid question? Really useful. You know, I learned that over a long time. But everybody seems to be okay with that kind of introduction to a question. So you can use that in any forum, and people will let you ask the stupid question, no matter how complicated or deep the question might be. Works really well. And even just saying the word explain, you know, already gets people into that inquiry mode rather than just counter proposal. Really good. Yeah, any other thoughts before we jump on, move on? No, all good. Maybe just quick on this. This is more for kind of bigger workshops than it is meetings. Have you ever had the situation, either in a workshop or a bigger meeting, where you just have one person, two people, or even at one side of the room, but is just resistant to every kind of action moving forward, or they're just constantly taking airtime? Have any of you had that situation yet?
Yeah, I have, but normally it's because they just don't want to make progress. They want to have excuses to keep why progress isn't happening. They just like to have an excuse for it, so they reject every idea. So then they're like, "Oh, we don't have an idea to move forward, so we can't move forward," kind of thing.
Yeah, it can be difficult and very disruptive, and often it really annoys everybody else in the room and just creates a really bad atmosphere if you have that kind of situation. And I have literally thrown people out of workshops in the past. It's the extreme measure, absolutely extreme. But really, if you have a couple of people or one person is just being destructive, there's no point almost continuing the workshop if it's that destructive. And very extreme, you have to remove that person from the workshop, which I've had to do at a very, very senior level a couple of times. It's a difficult thing to do, but as a facilitator, maybe you have to do it. Hopefully, though, you never come to that situation. However, dealing with difficult people, there's a little process you can do with dealing with kind of difficult people. Let me come to it here. And this is the close down approach. So if you're getting that happening, somebody saying, "Oh, I'm not happy, we're not moving along," saying, you go, "Thanks very much for your input. Joe, what do you think about it?" So you immediately take the airtime away and give it to somebody else. Doesn't matter who you give it to. Try and choose somebody that's maybe a bit friendly, or maybe that's reasonably senior enough to counter the person giving some resistance in the workshop. So that's the first kind of level of escalation. Thanks for your input. Joe, what do you think? Deflect the focus. If then they come back and they're still talking and intervening, then again, intervene. Thank you very much for your input. What do you think the rest of the group has a similar view? Or do you think the group has a different view? Then that's kind of a little bit more confrontational, but it gets them to think about what are the other people thinking in the room. If they're still going at it, now this is hard to do virtually, but you can still do it virtually. If they're still going at it, then there is nothing better than walking right up and standing right in front of somebody. I can guarantee you within about 10 seconds of you doing that, they will shut up because they'll feel physically threatened. It's a psychological trick. Not that you are physically threatening them. Just go up, stand right in front of them, listen to them, stand right in front of them. I can guarantee you within 10 seconds, they will stop talking, which then gives you the opportunity to divert the attention away from that person. You can do it virtually by getting right up or by going hand up on the virtual. It's a bit more difficult virtually, but you can do it virtually. And then if it really gets to that point where they're still going on, and I hope it's very rare that the walking up close has not worked. Only in a couple of situations I've got to that point. At that point, then you really have to say, okay, look, we've been talking on this for 10 minutes now. Very respectfully, I think we need to give other people a chance to speak. We will take a break in a minute. Yes. Let's just close out this topic and then move forward. And that's the point in time where you do take a break after that, because everyone will be in a bad mood anyway. And then during the break, you have to approach that person and go, look, you might mean well, but it's destroying the workshop. So how do you want to move forward? Because we can't have the workshop continuing in this state. And then at that point, you either have to kick them out or you invite them back in, but then they have to behave. It's kind of like dealing with children, actually, but you have to do that. Does that make sense? Hopefully you won't come across those situations so often. But again, it's just a facilitation process that you can work through that manages kind of destructive or resistant people in a workshop. Thoughts, reactions?
Yeah, I think it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned actually that it's like working with children, because similar things happen because I do some volunteer work with the Red Cross in Switzerland.
Yeah.
I know some of those techniques you were saying are what I use with the children, like standing, going close to them, and then they like stop talking and mouth sort of shut.
yeah, it is, but it does work. It does. Each of these little steps does work, and you can do it respectfully. You know, you don't have to do it in a bad way. You can do it very respectfully and very quietly and very gently. You know, you don't have to feel that you're personally, you know, being attacked. It's just your role as a facilitator. So I thought I'd jump on that just so that you've come across that once. Then, so that's how close decisions down, deal with difficult people in a workshop. Last thing, and then we're going to try something. Then we'll try something very quickly. Then kind of managing expectations, managing the documentation. I think Isabella was pointing to this. Really be clear on the purpose at the beginning, because that really sets the expectations. If you're there to make decisions, review a recommendation, take action, that purpose is always useful. Even a simple agenda can help. You know, even if it's just 3 bullet points of an agenda, that also helps set expectations and control the crowd as well, right? And a simple agenda could be introduction, the topic, next steps. That's all you need as an agenda, but already that will structure any event. Code of conduct, you can set a few rules. People will often be okay with you setting a few rules for the meeting. Could be as simple as, you know, please no multitasking. We really have to focus on the decision. People will tend to accept that. Wanted to touch on rules. This is where you can really use other people in the meeting or the workshop to help you. And often people are perfectly okay. If you go into a meeting and say, look, we've only got 30 minutes, so we need to be good on time. Please can somebody, and name somebody, can you watch the time? And when we get 5 minutes to the end of the meeting, can you please interrupt us and tell us we've got 5 minutes left? And people will be more than happy to take on a role like that as a timekeeper. And that's really helpful, because then that frees you up rather than also trying to manage the time or other activities. That frees you up on focusing on directing and facilitating the crowd. Same with the meeting minutes and the meeting notes. You can say, you know, X, please could you take the meeting notes or take note of the actions. Now, if you've got somebody you know that is good at doing that and you can trust to, you know, capture most of the good things, that's great. If not, you can still ask somebody to do it, but then as the facilitator, be clear on what they need to write down. So in the middle of a discussion, you're going through an action process. At the end of that little discussion, you can say, okay, Heather, please can you make a note of the action? We have agreed XXX. So then you actually just speak what you want written to the person that's taking the notes. And that can also be helpful. So rather than you typing notes as you're also trying to facilitate and do the presentation and everything else you're having to do, give somebody else the job to do it. So again, it's just ways of handing out activities so that you can focus more on the facilitation of the people and the decisions. Because back to Jamie's point, the more you can really concentrate and focus on facilitating the people and less on then the administration, the better your facilitation will be, the better you'll manage the crowd. Makes sense? I know we've covered Spacer before, but it puts Spacer really in the kind of context of running a big meeting or running a big workshop. Yeah, thoughts?
The one who's running workshop really does have a lot of responsibility and also needs to be given a certain amount of power to control everything. That can sometimes be the problem when you are running it alongside your CEO or somebody, and you just don't have as much freedom as you should, so you can't really control what's happening in a way. That can be a problem. Like that's what I've realized. And also now, like working with Scrum Master, I can see like the behavior and the structure and like the confidence it takes to just run a meeting. And that has also helped me be more clear and confident in what I ask of people in meetings or in workshops. I haven't had a workshop yet, but yeah, that's how I see it. And like a lot of things that we discussed can be prevented or resolved by the one who's actually running the workshop. So
absolutely, that's why the facilitator role is a really important role, and it does take some skill and experience to become good at it. And that's why I kind of said in the introduction, it's a little bit of a shame that there's not a lot of training for facilitation skills. People just expect you to be able to run a workshop effectively, but it really is a skill to build up, and with practice you can do that. And back to your point on your role and power that you have. So literally last week I ran a big workshop with the executive of the company, and they're way above my pay grade. Ciao, Jamie. And I know they're highly opinionated, right? Because they're very senior. They all have an opinion, and I know they can talk a lot. So right at the beginning, when I got to the E on my spacer, the expectations, and a bit after I'd just done the code of conduct, I got to expectations. I really said to them, I said, I'm really honored to be your host for this session. And I know we love to talk, and we could talk for days on this topic, but we have a limited amount of time. So please allow me to, if the conversation has gone round in circles a few times, to interrupt you respectfully and gently move us on. So you kind of ask, well, you tell them to give you permission to do that kind of thing up front. Or, you can say, just as similarly, you can say, allow me, when it comes to any decisions, if we're having difficulty reaching an agreement, to intervene and then bring in a formal governance around deciding or actions. So you can, in your introduction kickoff, you can really set those expectations. And once you've asked that question, people are always okay for you to interrupt and say, look, we've been talking about this for 5 minutes now. We need to move on respectfully. Let's move on to the next topic, or can we conclude, or we'll give it 2 more minutes and let's see if we can conclude, right? They'll let you do that at whatever level, as long as you've set the expectation at the beginning. If you don't set the expectation at the beginning, then it is actually much more difficult for you to interrupt and direct and control the crowd. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Very good.
Crowd is hard to control.
Yeah, it's back to control. It's controlling the crowd, or herding the cats is the common phrase. Herding the cats. So that's the kind of theory topics to focus on. Can build that up in experience. Got 15 minutes left. Jamie's dropped off. How would you like to use the time? We can actually do a little practice facilitation if you want, with like a fishbone diagram or a SWOT analysis, and have you facilitate. Or we can dive into any of your questions. Where do you have the most doubts when it comes to facilitation? Scrum Master management, because the Scrum Master, their role is largely facilitation and project planning, but largely facilitating a group of people, right? How would you like to use the time? We can do a little practice, or we can dive in a little bit deeper. What would you like to do?
I don't know. Is it facilitating if, like in everyday work, you expect people to do something for a certain project or some sorts, and how do you get them to actually do it if it's not their priority but it's priority for you? Maybe it's not facilitating, but like that can be like an issue, except for telling them that you need it and them saying that they know but not actually doing it.
Yeah, no, I mean that it's not necessarily facilitation. What we're talking about facilitation is more facilitating a group of people to get an outcome. But to your point, then, when you're running a project, or you're involved in a project, or you're part of a project, there's a lot of actions that need to get done, activities that need to get delivered. Guarantee you, a lot of people won't deliver their actions on time in full, because that's the biggest problem for any project manager. Yeah. One of the tricks is, rather than talk about action and activities, is to convert those actions into promises. Right? So then, if you've got the situation where you've been expecting somebody to deliver a piece of work or whatever it is, piece of information, or complete their action, and they've not done so, one of the best ways to get people to start delivering their actions is say, hey, you promised me that you would deliver that PowerPoint slide or whatever it is, right? It changes the deal on the action. People genuinely don't like to break their promises. We're brought up from school, everybody around the world, exactly the same culture. When you make a promise, we've been brought up to keep our promises, right? So when you use the word promise, it genuinely changes the reaction, right? You can say, because it's very different if I say, hey, where's that slide? You had an action, you were due to deliver the action on X day. But if you say, hey, you promised me that you'd deliver that slide, has a completely different impact.
Yeah, I have an issue because in English some of the words sound way softer than they sound in my language, and they also I love you, like it's so global now that it doesn't really mean anything. Like people all over the world just yeah, I love you. But when you say it in your language, especially in mine, like promises are tied to like the culture and like the word and everything is a bit different. So by saying that with somebody who I work with from my country,
yeah.
it will like be kind of insulting in a way. Because you would actually accuse them of breaking a promise or something by saying it in past tense. So it can be a little hard using like all the tips which are tied to English speaking.
That's true.
But yeah, I understand that you are holding them accountable in a different way.
Exactly.
Just with this example, I think in my language it would be hard to use it with somebody that I work from, because we do speak in our language on daily basis. Yeah.
If you can find a word that has a similar, aspect of more of a personal commitment, if you can find a word that's far more about a personal commitment, you said you would deliver that for me.
Yeah.
Even that makes it more of a personal commitment to deliver, rather than come at it from a pure project management action way. But that's one way. The other way, again, back to Isabella's point about documenting the agreement and all that kind of stuff. Document the action. If they've not delivered it, join back. That kind of thing. If they've not delivered it, will come back and deliver it again.
Got it. It makes sense. Like as soon as something becomes more personal, and it does, like, in a way, hold more weight to it. So thank you.
Yeah, the other way that's very helpful is really set the expectations around actions early on. So either if you're working in a squad or anything like that, or a team, you can really say early on, say, hey, look, I really expect everybody, including me, that we all deliver on our actions on time, in full, without any errors. Right? I always find that's really useful to qualify the delivery of the action. I really believe that everybody should deliver our actions on time, in full, no errors, because then we'll work well together and we'll trust each other if everybody's delivering their actions. So you can also set expectations up early, or when you've agreed an action with somebody, you can really say at that point, say, look, it's an important action for me. I really expect if you said you'll deliver it on X day, that you will. And if you can't deliver it for whatever reason, please let me know in advance. That's also a good way of managing deliverables.
Cool, thank you.
But certainly as a project manager or Scrum Master, even more as a Scrum Master, because the time frame for actions is often, days, not weeks or months.
Yeah.
You are the professional, again, it's an English word, sorry, nagger. You're the professional person that has to be in the ear every day saying, have you done it yet? Have you done it yet? Have you done it yet? Because that's the job, essentially, is to drive people to deliver their actions. Right?
Yeah.
In a nice way.
Since we had a Scrum Master, the atmosphere has changed, I think, in a good way, because everything is actually documented, and there are sprints and tasks, user stories, and you can see them, you can see what's not done, and everybody is held accountable and asked every day for that. So I didn't even know that was a job like 2 years ago, and now I think I see like the full function and like the importance and what it can do for a company. So
yeah, absolutely. It's an important. I mean, people make their whole careers out of just being a project manager or a project management office person, or Scrum Master now has certainly been a career path that's expanded significantly in the last 5 or 6 years. And you can get accreditation for that. Project Management Institute, you can go and do all of that. So yeah.
I'm not sure actually how it would be done if it wasn't online. Like if people were in a company, like would you actually have 15 minutes or 5-minute meetings where you would go into a room and
Exactly.
Yeah,
the daily Scrum meetings, the quick 15-minute meetings, if it's well organized, it can be super powerful, because you really keep on top of the delivery and development work, especially IT. It is really useful for IT development activities. Gets a bit more difficult if you're doing kind of like transformations, reorganizations, because the work doesn't move every day. Sometimes you can go weeks in a preparation piece before the activity gets delivered. But certainly for any kind of development work, daily 15-minute huddles can significantly make a difference in the accelerating the delivery. Absolutely.
Cool.
But again, a good facilitator can also make the difference. You can also have a bad Scrum Master. I've come across a few that are not so good. And they can actually slow the process down if they're not very good. But you get a good one, and it works well.
Yeah, I can see that being an issue as well. I mean, you have to be good at everything.
Yeah, it's these skills that you can pick up over time, definitely. Good. Any other questions? I think Isabella had to take another quick phone call.
Regarding this, no. But like this whole workshop has started a whole series of questions in my head for like future business and things. Like, I mean, I think that's good because I would work through all of these and like try to make it like most optimized in every section so that I don't make my life harder on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. The secret of a good workshop is preparation. We'll come to, so next week we're going to talk about executive presence. So that's really the ability to like stand in front of 300 people and look confident and great. So how do you build that executive presence? That's of course linked to facilitation, which is then linked to the change management topic. Then after the executive presence, we'll actually go into how to do a hackathon, like a big concentrated workshop. The process for a hackathon you can apply to a 1-hour workshop, you can apply to a conference. It's really about the process. So how do you build effective working sessions where you have lots of people in it? So those are all linked, the change management to facilitation skill, executive presence, how you stand there with confidence. Then how then do you build the workshop itself? And then we'll finish a little bit with coaching. So that's the next sessions then coming up, all connected together.
Cool. I'll be on leave, I think, from 20th of December.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll finish before then. That's for sure.
Yeah, cool.
Very good then. Then, oh, Isabella's back.
I'm back, sorry.
That's okay.
Did you finish the recording?
Yeah, we've got the recording, so all good. Any final question then before we log off for the day?
No, all good from my side. It was very useful. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Sarah.
Then look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great rest of the day and weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.